Hey friends, Ari Koinuma here, and thanks for tuning in. Today I wanted to share with you my thoughts on how our ability to feel emotions or to have feelings are similar to our muscles and how our muscles work. And it's a metaphor that I came up with a while ago, and I've been sort of using it in many situations, and so far it's holding up. So I want to share with you, and understanding this will help you troubleshoot, like where in your emotional intelligence you might have weaknesses, and that weakness leads to you being pretty bad at handling certain situations or certain feelings, which will then lead to certain patterns that you keep repeating in your life, or certain blockages or obstacles that you just can't seem to overcome. All these things can be sort of analyzed and troubleshot with this model of emotions as in muscles. So at the fundamental level, my concept is this. As you know, muscles get stronger when they are challenged, when they're used, right? And if you don't use them, they atrophy and they become weaker. The same concept applies to our feelings, in that there are certain feelings that we are very comfortable feeling, and there are others that we are less comfortable feeling. And when you encounter a lot of feelings that you're not very good at feeling, what happens is you might sort of stuff it down and try not to feel them. So, for example, if you recall the film Inside Out from Pixar, I love that film. It really is a great sort of examination of how different feelings work in our minds, right? And I'm an amateur psychologist, so if there is any of you that are professional watching this, please correct me when I might be a little off, or enhance upon what I think I'm seeing in my own observations. But when we take that movie as an example, right? Let's just say, for the sake of today's discussion, that we have 5 basic emotions, right? Joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And we have varying degrees of sort of strengths or ability to be able to feel these feelings. So if I were to rate myself, my strongest feeling is actually sadness, so I would rate myself as like on the scale of 1 to 5, right? 5 being the best. I would say I'm really good with sadness. I'm okay with joy, 3, oddly enough. I'm really bad with anger, so I would give myself 1 here. Who's good at feeling fear? Maybe. I would say 3, disgust, 3, something like that. So then if I were to pretend this is a spider chart or area chart or whatever this is called, I might say 5 is here, anger is in the middle, fear is here, disgust is here, joy is here, right? So you get an odd shaped area in the middle, right? And so what happens is, so I'm not good with anger, so if I encounter situations where I should get mad, what happens is I used to kind of clamp down that anger, and I would say, there was probably a good reason why that person did that way, or I found myself making excuses for offending parties, and I would not allow myself to feel mad, and I would just sort of stuff it down, right? And I don't know if you watched my last week's episode, but when you stuff down a feeling instead of actually experiencing it, instead of actually feeling it, it gets stuck in your subconscious and in your body, and there it festers for years and years and years until it can become some serious illness. But what happens is when you're bad at feeling certain feelings, you encounter more situations where that feeling is involved, and you develop a habit of going, more anger, no, I can't feel it. stuff it down, stuff it down. And then as the years go on, your emotional baggage get bigger. And the thing is, with that much emotional baggage, you will do all kinds of things. Like, first of all, whatever you're bad at feeling, you keep encountering other places. Like, your life develops a pattern of running into situations where that should be the triggered emotion, but you can't have it. But that's kind of your subconscious, your body kind of leading you and getting you attracted to situations where you're likely to find this feeling, so that that stuck feelings finally have a chance to sort of come to the surface and get processed and get experienced. But most of us, as you know, just don't sort of understand things that way, so we just keep stuffing down, and more bad things happen. So what I would do with this understanding is nothing like too active, but just to watch for the habits that are formed in places where you know that you are not very good with those feelings, right? And then when you encounter the situation, what happens is that if you encounter a situation that contain even a little bit of this feeling, because you have not practiced, you have not built the emotional muscle for feeling that feeling, so you get easily overwhelmed, right? Little things might feel like a big deal to you, and you might feel over dramatic, overreacting. But that is another sign that says, you're kind of vulnerable in that area, right? So in that case, first of all, I would give myself sort of cut some slack. I mean, we all have these vulnerabilities, right? I mean, there's no use in sort of blaming myself, but it's useful to say, hey, you know what, you're not good in these situations. You're really sort of getting knocked off balance really easily. That might not be okay, but you have to allow it, right? And you sit and feel it, right? You resist the temptation to stuff it down, just really feel it. For my case, I have tendency to engage in some mind-numbing kind of indulgences, like whether it's like social media or YouTube or whatever, games on my phone, right? These mind-numbing, distracting kind of indulgences. I mean, that's what I used to spend a lot of, well, I still do, spend a lot of time doing those things, because I get so tired of feeling everything, and then I just want something to distract me. Well, when I'm encountering feelings that I'm not really good at feeling, I even tend to use that more. So we all need breaks. I mean, we can't just say, if your muscles is worth 5 pounds weight, and if you all of a sudden are given 15 pounds, obviously you get overwhelmed. You can't blame yourself for being overwhelmed, but I would try to just sit with the feeling as much as possible without distracting and feel it. And it's hard, and if the tears come, that is actually a good thing, although it doesn't feel good, is because that means you're actually letting it overwhelm you, and you're actually feeling the full extent of that feeling as much as you can at the time. And then the more you do, your muscle will grow, and you become less overwhelmed and less seriously affected by the feelings that you encounter, and your sort of a calmness or sense of peace or sense of control in your life will increase, and you get sort of more even keeled, and you feel more stable that way instead of dramatic. And I can tell you, the other day I finally really felt my anger. I was in a meeting for work, and somebody just really did something that really in my mind was inexcusably, or I could not think of an excuse to justify that person's action. So I was really mad, and I was like hitting pillows on my couch, and I was feeling actually like really exhilarated. I was like, oh my god, I was like, oh my goodness, I am really mad right now, and I'm just feeling that energy of the anger course through my body, and just had a oddly good time sort of feeling fully embodying and just taking actions out of my anger. And so I feel like I'm on my way to reclaim anger. In fact, I feel like, and this is where my music comes in, right? I'm a big rock music fan, and I think part of the reason why I am into rock is because rock is like about as healthy, rock and metal, right? Is probably about as healthy of a way to channel somebody's anger, right? You don't want to, just because you feel them doesn't mean that you should take it out on other people, right? Or in yourself either. You need these feelings to have a healthy outlet. So with energizing high risk feelings like anger, of course, things like exercise or martial arts is great, but then rock and metal is an amazing outlet for anger. Things like fear, disgust, these are again harder feelings to get good at. Actually, I don't know. I think disappointment or heartbreak is probably somewhere between sadness and anger and fear. I don't know how they will relate, but nobody's good at being disappointed, right? I mean, that's a really, really hard feeling. And people will do all kinds of things to avoid being disappointed. Just the feeling of some of these, the experience of some of these feelings are so terrifying, so overwhelming that we would rather hurt ourselves or we would rather get sick than to experience some of these things. So if you find yourself in these patterns where you are you constantly keep pushing it away, but it keeps happening, right? Whether it's bad boyfriends or terrible bosses or stressful situations, that is another sort of clues to sort of examine your emotional muscle or emotional strength and see what it is that in there that you feel are too overwhelming and you don't have enough strength to really face them. And oddly enough, I also find from my personal experience that happiness and joy is definitely a feeling that if you're not used to feeling them, you don't allow yourself, you can't feel it, right? I used to clamp down on happiness and excitement too, because too much of it overwhelms me. And then of course that like people can cry for being happy, right? That is the indication that says that person is experiencing more joy and happiness than she or he can handle, so you start crying. I'm practicing that and trying to sort of raise my comfort level with these happiness and joy and these so-called desirable feelings so that I can fully experience that as well. But these feelings are not bad or good by its nature. Some are harder to get good at feeling. But if you sort of spend time feeling them and experiencing them, they serve their purpose, they create experience, and then most importantly, if you see and feel them, you will eventually be done feeling them and you'll be able to move on. One example I can tell you is when my father died 14 years ago, we knew for a while that he was going to die because he had ALS, right? And so every time I imagine my father's passing before he died, I would start crying, I would start grieving. I started grieving for it before it happened, and then it happened, and then it happened. Of course, I grieved afterwards too. And every time I think about my father, or every time I talk about him, I would feel the emotions come up. But over time, I found that I start becoming more and more able to talk about him without getting emotional. So that means that I properly grieved my father's passing. Not that it means any less, right? But the immediate feelings that were generated from him being gone and missing him, I fully felt and processed it. So now I can talk about it or even think about it without getting emotional. So that's a sign that says if there's anything in the past that is very too painful to even think about, and then if ever you get emotional every time you talk about it with somebody, that is another sign that says you have a baggage attached to those feelings, and that if you want to, again, live a fulfilling, satisfying, peaceful, calm life, it's a kind of thing where it gets worse before it gets better kind of thing, but you want to revisit those places in your life in the past, and it's not easy, but you want to fully feel those feelings so that you can move on from that. Alright, so that's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching. Whatever you think of this, if you agree or if you disagree, I would love to know. So please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.